You're dying. What's up, gentlemen and ladies and human beings of all ages, sizes, and belt sizes? Boy, I've got the belt size, I tell you what. Today, what I would like to talk to you about is the Kids Online Safety Act in the U.S. and its apparent spiritual successor that if the COSA gets shot down, will do the same thing, the Screen Act, but it's way more blatant in its purpose statement, at least. It's like, to make sure that people accessing websites aren't minors. I want to say right now, one of the nice things about the U.S. is the Constitution, specifically the First Amendment. I will tell you right now, philosophically, I'm not making a legal argument here. Philosophically, I am a First Amendment absolutist. The First Amendment is not possible to be absolute because some forms of speech, they are basically violence. Now, I am not the kind of person who says that speech is violence, but if someone wants to, if they're holding a gun to someone's head, and you're like, shoot him now, then that is, while you didn't pull the trigger, you are pushing the person, and you know that they're going to pull the trigger if you push them. That's basically accessory to murder. Let's just be honest. The limitations come down to something that extreme, but yes, if you are forcefully demanding that someone commit the crime, and they commit the crime, then, and you know that they'll do it if you do that, then you are committing a crime. The question is not whether the First Amendment is absolute, because it can't be absolute. The question is, where do you draw the line? And I draw the line at the extremes. Now, the Supreme Court has generally ruled that prior restraints on free speech are not constitutional. And I think that while the Supreme Court has erred in ruling against, or rather ruling for states that have adult, like ID, age verification laws for porn sites, the Supreme Court has ruled that it's okay for porn sites to have age verification laws that require them to verify age. I think that that's unconstitutional because the First Amendment doesn't say that Congress shall pass no law abridging the freedom of speech, ... except when minors are involved and pornographic sites exist. There's no exception like that. And the Supreme Court has very consistently in the past ruled against what they call prior restraints on free speech. A prior restraint on free speech is basically telling you that you're not allowed to say something before you can even say it. So if I want to protest, let's say I want to protest Visa and MasterCard's, the gaming thing right now where Visa and MasterCard got a bunch of games banned, and I want to protest that, and the government, like some government somewhere passes a law saying that you can't do that, that you can't protest that because it will lead to violence, or that protesting, say, preferential hiring for Muslims or whatever, that would be a violation of the Civil Rights Act or something. In general, prohibitions on free speech are unconstitutional because guess what? The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, blah, blah, blah. And freedom of speech is right there at the beginning. And Congress shall make no law abridging is pretty clear. It is not a relative statement. It doesn't have exceptions. It is absolute. And pornography is free speech. I know that some of you are like, oh, pornography is bad and immoral and unethical and herp, and it leads to social decay. That's fine. You're entitled to that opinion. You are more than welcome to have that opinion. You're more than welcome to advocate against it. I have no problem with you staunchly advocating against pornographic media or whatever. Where I have a problem is when it becomes law, because it should not become law. These kinds of abolitionist concepts, they cannot become law. They are not constitutional. They are a greater affront to the concept of freedom of speech than, well, I don't know where I was going with that. They are the greatest affront to freedom of speech, because freedom of speech exists to protect the most unpopular speech. Pictures are speech. Videos are speech. Audio is speech. Video games are speech. They are effectively interactive movies. All of this stuff is speech. And free speech inherently means freedom from consequences. That is what the free part of free speech means. Because if there are consequences, because you know they love to say, oh, you can have freedom of speech, but you don't get freedom from consequences. Except no. Philosophically speaking, not legally, but philosophically speaking, freedom of speech is and always will be freedom from consequences for engaging in any kind of speech. Now, you can't escape some of the consequences of your speech, but in particular, in the government sense, the government cannot give you consequences for your speech. That is generally the whole thing that the freedom of speech in the Constitution does. But it is more than that. It is a philosophy that if you say something, you have the right to say it, and I have the right to disagree with you loudly and tell you what I think of you. But at the end of the day, putting you in jail, that's not okay. Enacting violence against you for your speech, even if I think it's the worst thing that you could possibly have ever said in your life, like if you run around saying, I advocate for everybody to rape all the babies, if that's what you choose to say, well, that's disgusting and horrible and sickening, and the vast majority of people would probably disagree with you, but you have the right to say it. It's stupid, it's hateful, whatever, but you still have the right to say it. And your ability to say it is what allows me to point at it, say, do you see this thing? This is what I disagree with, and here's why. In doing so, we have a robust information economy, shall we say. You have robust intellectual discussion and debate. But if you're not allowed to engage in certain speech, even if it's really reprehensible speech, even if it's KKK stuff, for example, everybody, generally speaking, the vast majority of American society sides against the Ku Klux Klan and their rhetoric, okay? But we have seen the problem with banning, say, like when Cloudflare banned Stormfront from their services. CEO's like, I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed one day and decided to ban the white supremacists or whatever. Oh, how noble. Except the problem is when you strip those people from the web, when you make it so their opinions can't be expressed, now you don't have anything to point at and go, you see this, Johnny? This is wrong. And here's why I think it's wrong. Because if you point at it now, it's like, well, you're not even allowed. You've unpersoned it. You've unconcepted it. You've wrong-thinked it. So now you can't even point at it so that someone can understand it and thus understand why it's wrong. This is the major problem with unpersoning on social media, by the way, but that's another topic. So you got this thing where you can't even look at something and go, that's why it's wrong. But it goes beyond that, like, platforms and such. Like, they need to be able to say this bad stuff so that you can point at and laugh at them. If you make something forbidden, it also makes it more appealing. So I personally, because, and this is an anecdote from my personal life, when Columbine happened, my stepmother went through all my stuff in my bedroom. I came home from school. She had just watched a news report about the Columbine mass shooting, and she went through everything in my bedroom looking for anything that might, potentially make me, maybe he might become one of these mass shooters. I mean, it's an absolutely moronic thing to do. A fundamental violation of trust and privacy. Of course, parents like that will say something like, well, you're under my roof, you're my kid, you have no privacy. I can do whatever I want, but the trust is still shattered, right? And she goes through my stuff looking to see, is he going to be one of these mass shooter people? And you really think that going through my stuff is going to stop it? So what I did in response to that was I got a leather trench coat and started wearing it to school. And I started reading everything I could about how to make bombs on the internet. Not because I was going to make the bombs, but because I wasn't supposed to know how. Because it was the most direct way that I could rebel against her going through my stuff and treating me like she did. It was disgusting, and I found it abhorrent, unethical, immoral, you take your pick. It's probably one of the greatest injuries that I have felt to myself and to my fundamental concept of how things should be. It was really eye-opening for me. Like, This kind of thing where you're like, oh, I'm going to go through your shit and I'm going to see if you're a bad person. It's like, so you don't just know that I'm not a bad person. You've got to go through my stuff. Really? And how well did that work out for you? So you didn't talk to me. You went through my stuff and assumed that you'd find some, like, and you assumed that I'd be stupid enough to store the pipe bombs or whatever in my bedroom. Are you dumb? But yeah, anyway, so that means in high school, I learned how to make pipe bombs. I know exactly how they're made. If I had the stuff to make one, I could make one. I could make one right now because I do know how they're put together. I wouldn't do it. I would never do it because I don't see the point, for one thing. But I have that knowledge purely as a rebellion against my parents. Specifically my stepmother, who was this, morally righteous person back in the day, and who violated my trust and such. You get the idea. You take an idea and you make it forbidden, it becomes more interesting. So bans and censorship often have a massive rubber band effect where they pull back on it and it causes it to become slingshotted out into orbit. We have also seen this issue with, and I'm going to go there, with child pornography, with prostitution, with stealing, black market sales, all of that. All of these things are illegal. All of these things are things that, generally speaking, you cannot participate in. And when you shut down the venues by which a bunch of people are acquiring this stuff, you can no longer monitor them. The government famously enacted the Sesta-Fosta Acts, which, by the way, are also grossly unconstitutional. They enacted these purely for the purpose of taking down a single organization, which was Backpage.com. There's a Reason TV video about Backpage and how the government went out of its way to take them down, if you would like to get the full backstory on that. But the bottom line is Backpage was taken down by the government through Sesta-Fosta, which carves out this weird exception where somehow if it's a sexual, if someone posts selling sexual services in your classifieds, now you're directly legally responsible, even though all the other laws say that you shouldn't be. Somehow you're responsible for that user-generated content. Massive chilling effect, and it nuked the marketplace where a whole lot of child prostitution and trafficking was taking place, and a lot of law enforcement agencies were really pissed off at the feds because when they killed Backpage, Backpage being this hive where all of these criminals would show up and prostitute out underage girls, well, now you've killed the marketplace. So what happens? Do you think that the people pimping out these young teens, that they just, Backpage is gone, guess I can't pimp out, Ashley over here anymore? No, of course not. What they did is they scattered, they dispersed, and then went to other places that were not on the radar of the government. And now they're even harder to find. It's harder for law enforcement to find people who are trafficking minors and rescue the minors because Backpage was nuked in the name of protecting minors. And the same thing's playing out with the internet censorship today. And all of it's unconstitutional. Sesta-Fosta is unconstitutional. The Kids Online Safety Act is unconstitutional. The Screen Act is unconstitutional. Hell, the Children Online Privacy Protection Act was unconstitutional. The Communications Decency Act was unconstitutional and was ruled unconstitutional with the exception of Section 230, which is the only part that survived constitutional scrutiny. All of this stuff is prior restraint on free speech. It's all unconstitutional, and there's absolutely no reason that we should follow these laws. Everybody should go out of their way to violate the crap out of these laws at their first and every opportunity because they are unjust laws. Unjust laws should not be followed, and that's the end of that. Yeah, that's my piece. These laws are all crap, and they're unconstitutional, and hopefully the Supreme Court will not be stupid and will actually rule in a constitutionally valid way that all of this stuff is not constitutional. Same thing with the Second Amendment. The prefatory clause says that, the militia, blah, blah, blah. Then the actual clause that has effect is the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, the militia part has nothing to do with it. This is part of the justification for this law. It's not, this is the law. This is a major reason why this law exists. But saying this law exists because doesn't mean that the law now has less of an effect just because you said, well, this is a rationale that we used for coming to the need for it. And I don't understand how it is that the Supreme Court is so stupid on a lot of these issues, although honestly I kind of do understand, because to be completely honest, and this is another video for another day, but I'll just lay it out right here, every female Supreme Court justice was a mistake. Ruth Bader Ginsburg introduced shit like intermediate scrutiny, which doesn't exist in the Constitution anywhere. It's some manufactured crap that she did that actually reduced the power of equal rights in the Constitution. The whole equality thing, yeah, you know how people are supposed to be treated equally under the law, the Equal Protection Clause. Intermediate scrutiny is how the Supreme Court worked around the fact that if you interpreted that with strict scrutiny, well, everybody would have to be treated equally. But no, we got this weirdo concept that Ruth Bader Ginsburg just pulled out of her ass that neuters the Equal Protection Clause so that, well, some people don't have to be equally protected, and we just kind of get to arbitrarily decide who. Yeah, and I don't even need to tell you about Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's basically the DEI hire of the Supreme Court. Amy Coney Barrett probably rules wrong 80% of the time, and you get the idea. Sotomayor, do I really have to say anything about Sotomayor? And just, if you go back, you probably can't find a single female Supreme Court justice that has not been a mistake. So, fingers crossed, maybe one day an autistic female justice will show up that's not captured by trans ideology or something. But hey, whatever. This is sort of getting off topic, so I'm going to cut it off here. Plus, I'm getting into town, and right now, I've got quite a hankering for a hamburger or maybe a leaf. I don't know. Maybe I'll buy a single leaf of a salad, and maybe then I won't have this lovely waistline to entertain you with in my videos. Also, it's really friggin' dark. Have a wonderful day. And YouTube's not been counting anything related to watch time anymore. Now it's all about likes, dislikes, and comments, apparently. And if you don't do any of those things, then YouTube thinks that you don't like my video. Even if you watch the entire thing all the way through, even if you do that 10 times, YouTube still dings me because of that. And it's the dumbest thing ever, but unfortunately it's the system we live under. Be sure to note that all of my alternative media channels on other websites are in the description. Have a wonderful dark. It's really friggin' dark. Take it easy.